The Okami series is one filled to the brim with characters that draw inspiration from many different sources of inspiration, and trying to cover the entirety of these two games is no easy feat. Nonetheless, I'm ready to look at all the thought that went into these great games as a series of special episodes of character development. Keep in mind though that I'm mainly looking at the characters. I may discuss locations if they contribute to the topic, but I'm otherwise looking past them for now. Also, there will be spoilers, as I will be talking about characters both major and minor as well as what they do in the story. All that said, I will begin this ordeal by discussing the most obvious source of Okami's inspiration, Japanese mythology. So get out your pencils, trivia enthusiasts, because this is character development. Of course, the best place to begin looking for Okami's links to Japanese mythology would be the main character, the sun goddess Amaterasu. Ami is named after the central goddess of Japan's indigenous religion, Shinto. As the legend goes, Japan was created by a pair of deities named Izanagi and Izanami, and these two attempted to create the first kami, albeit fairly unsuccessfully, with Izanami dying while trying to give birth to the kami of fire. Izanagi journeyed into the land of the dead, Yomi, to try and bring Izanami back to the world of the living. However, upon discovering Izanami's decaying body, he escaped from Yomi and went to cleanse himself of the underworld's impurities. Upon doing so, he created the three central kami, those being Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo. Izanagi and Izanami appear in Okami as Nagi and Nami, two of the residents of the past Kamiki village, but their portrayals are fairly far from the legends. As for the three kami, Amaterasu's control over sunlight is very noticeable and well interpreted. In fact, the reason why she's a wolf happens to be a Japanese play on words. Okami, depending on whether it's spelled as one or two words, can mean either great god or wolf. Tsukuyomi, the kami of the moon, appears as the sword that sealed Orochi, and really doesn't reference the god much aside from being decorated with a lunar motif. Lastly comes Susanoo, who is seen in Okami not as a god, but as a human resident of Kamiki village. While Susanoo's details are better seen in the scenes prior to the battle with Orochi, it is worth noting that he prides himself in being a descendant of Nagi. Also important to Okami's plot is Ami's companion throughout the adventure, the wandering artist Issun. Despite being the size of a flea, Issun is actually a humanoid creature referred to as a ponko. He also carries Denkomaru, his trusty brush that also doubles as a sword. All this put together, it's clear as water that Issun is based on the folktale of Issun-Boshi, a young man only 1 inch tall. Considering himself a miniature samurai, Issun-Boshi gets a job protecting a local daimyo's daughter, despite being scorned for his shortness. One day, an Oni attempts to ambush the princess, and he also swallows Issun-Boshi whole. From within the Oni's stomach, though, Issun is able to make the Oni spit him out and run off in fear, leaving behind the magical Uchide's mallet, which the princess uses to make Issun the size of a real human. Even though Issun doesn't follow the tale too explicitly, Uchide's mallet is represented in-game and true to the tale as the Lucky Mallet, shrinking Amaterasu down to Issun's size and allowing her to explore various new territories. Moving on to the third region of the game, Taka Pass, there is a large resort and bamboo grove known as Sasa Sanctuary, and it happens to be run by a group of sparrows. Close to it is a home owned by Mr. and Mrs. Cutter, and all this ties together into a Japanese tale known as Shitakiri Suzume, or the tongue-cut sparrow. In this story, an elderly cutter decides to help an injured sparrow, caring for it in his own home, much to his wife's objections. The two left the sparrow alone, and the wife came back to find that the sparrow had eaten an entire bowl of starch. Angered, she cut out the bird's tongue and sent it back into the mountains. The husband, looking for the bird, was directed by other sparrows to their inn, located in the middle of a bamboo grove. The sparrows, thanking the old man, gave him the choice of a large or small basket, to which he picked the latter, assuming it to be lighter, but upon returning home, found it to be filled with treasure. Driven by greed, his wife went to obtain the large basket, but upon opening it, found it to be filled with demons. Even though the Mr. and Mrs. Cutter seen in Okami are simply demons disguising themselves as the real deal, it is worth noticing that the large basket, demons and all, can be seen on Mrs. Cutter's back. Also in the area of Taka Pass is Kusa Village, home of a craftsman named Mr. Bamboo and his adoptive granddaughter Kaguya. As Mr. Bamboo puts it, he discovered Kaguya in a metallic bamboo shaft, with he and his wife taking in the mysterious child and caring for her. As it turns out, Kaguya is one of the last living members of the Moon Tribe, and she is longing to return to her home in the very rocket that saved her from the destruction of the Moon Tribe. Mr. Bamboo and Kaguya's roles in the story are condensed versions of the tale of the Bamboo Cutter, which is also about an elderly couple who discovers a mysterious infant inside a shaft of bamboo, only to learn that the child is from a lunar civilization. However, the major deviation here is that the original story includes multiple princes asking for Kaguya's hand in marriage, with Kaguya giving each a nearly impossible challenge to complete. Getting back to Okami, there's something else interesting about Kaguya's design, that being these hair ornaments that resemble rabbit ears. This brings me to another reference to the moon's depiction in Japanese mythology, and one that involves the celestial brush god Yumigami. Yumigami's status as a lunar deity, as well as its appearance as a rabbit, both point to how the Japanese look at the moon. Instead of seeing a face on the moon, the Japanese traditionally see it as a rabbit making mochi, a type of rice cake that requires one person to pound the dough with a wooden mallet, with another person kneading the dough between strikes, just as Amaterasu and Yumigami do after the latter has been restored. One of the most important events to Okami's storyline is the resurrection of a massive and powerful demon by the name of Orochi. This goes back to one of the first three kami, Susanoo. According to one well-known tale, after Susanoo desecrated Amaterasu's property in a fit of rage, he was banished from the heavens. After landing on the surface world, he met with an elderly couple that had been sacrificing their daughters to appease an 8-headed serpent named Yamata-no-Orochi. They had only one daughter, Kushinada, left to give, and couldn't bear to sacrifice her themselves. Susanoo agreed to carry out this task, but he instructed the elderly couple to prepare sake, placing it into 8 containers separated by 8 gates. Orochi finally appeared, and with each of his heads drinking from the sake, it became so intoxicated that it passed out, allowing Susanoo to chop off each of the serpent's heads and tails. Okami interprets this story very well, with Amaterasu using the 8 purification sake to weaken Orochi, and then combining her power with Susanoo's to behead the demon. Not only that, but in both instances, a sword emerges from the dead body of Orochi. In Okami, it's the divine instrument Sumugari, and in Japanese mythology, it's the blade of Kusanagi. Looking at the Japanese version of Okami, this even ties Kusa village into the reference chain. By the time the story moves on to Ryoshima Coast, Ami and Issun meet a priestess by the name of Rao, who turns out to be one of Yami's familiars, a shape-shifting fox named Ninetails, and it plays the sun goddess into its hands by having her unknowingly contribute to her plan to kill Queen Himiko. Ninetails is based on the mythological figure of Tamamo-no-Mae, a courtesan under the emperor and widely known for her beauty and intelligence, having considerable knowledge in a variety of subjects despite her young age. However, one day, the emperor mysteriously fell ill, and an astrologer stated that Tamamo-no-Mae was not only the source of the illness, but that she was also a nine-tailed fox working for an evil daimyo in a plot to kill and succeed the emperor. What's also notable about this tale and its ties with Okami is that the emperor's illness happens to be where Blight gets its inspiration, and the evil daimyo bit can easily be seen as where Yami ties into all of this. From here on, though, Ninetails' inspiration goes from the tale of Tamamo-no-Mae and back to the standard lore regarding nine-tailed foxes, better known as kitsune. Also in the area of Ryoshima Coast, there is a fisherman by the name of Urashima, whom Ami initially encounters while being bullied by a group of children. These children don't believe a story that Urashima is trying to tell, a story about how he was escorted to the undersea dragon palace. According to Urashima, when he was taken into the dragon palace, he stayed for many years and his age was preserved in a treasure box. This is one of the more obvious mythological references, in this case to the tale of Urashima Taro. As the story goes, a fisherman named Urashima saves a turtle being bullied by a group of children, and to repay the favor, another turtle appears the next day, telling Urashima that the turtle he saved was actually Princess Otohime, the daughter of the Emperor of the Sea. The turtle then brings Urashima to the Dragon Palace, where he stays for a few days, but upon leaving, Otohime gives Urashima a box called a tamate-bako, warning him not to open it. Upon returning, Urashima finds that 300 years had passed in his stay underwater, and in grief he opens the box which had sealed his age, turning him into an old man. The connections this tale has to Okami are both numerous and noticeable, and furthered with a reference to the end of the story, where Ami can obtain and return the tamate-bako to Urashima, where it turns him into an old man again. When compared to its prequel, Okami is a bit lacking on the cultural connections, but one shining example from this game involves Bullhead, a massive catfish demon who is responsible for flooding Agata Forest, but also insists that he's a carp and not a catfish. As he puts it, he has flooded the forest so that he can create a waterfall, swim up it, and become a dragon. This is a two-part reference based on the two fish he's labeled as. On the more obvious catfish side, this is a reference to the Namazu, a race of earthquake-causing catfish, though Bullhead is never clearly seen using this ability. As for the carp half, this is a trait from a bit of mythology shared between many East Asian cultures. The belief goes that if a carp can swim up a waterfall, it turns into a dragon. You might already be familiar with this concept, as it also inspired the Pokemon Magikarp and Gyarados. And here comes the part I'm sure a lot of people were waiting for, the bestiary in both Okami and Okamiden, as there are a large number of minor enemies based on various yokai from Japanese mythology. Unfortunately, I really can't cover every last enemy, so I'll just highlight a few of particular interest. The first that comes to mind is Okami's first boss, the Spider Queen. As if her design and theme weren't unsettling enough, the Japanese version of the game refers to her as a Jorogumo, a man-eating spider whose name literally translates to prostitute spider. Less macabre are the Namahage seen in Kamui. These are based on straw-garbed ogres that people dress up as for a New Year's celebration. Usually carrying fake deba knives or teoke pails, the locals dressed as Namahage go door to door, scolding children who were known for misbehaving. Likewise in Okami, the blade, bucket, and cannon Namahage are seen carrying deba and teoke. What about all of the imps? Well, what they represent is clear in their Japanese name, Amano-jaku. Typically seen as small oni, Amano-jaku are capable of manipulating humans into committing wicked deeds. The blue and red ogres, on the other hand, are the prime representatives of regular oni. All of the rolling enemies have interesting backgrounds. In the Japanese version, the Fire Eye, Ice Mouth, Thunder Ear, and Earth Nose are referred to as Wanyudo, the name of a mythological creature depicted as a head with a tormented expression in the middle of a flaming ox cart wheel. The doom mirrors are called Ungaikyo, a living mirror and type of Tsukumogami, an inanimate object that gains life upon becoming 100 years old. The last of the rolling enemies, the Poltergeist, not only throws a German term into the mix, but is also named Kamaitachi in the Japanese version. Kamaitachi are a trio of sickle-wielding weasels who deal painful, albeit non-fatal, attacks in tandem to their victim. The final minor enemy I want to highlight is actually one from Okami, as well as one whose name doesn't immediately tell you about its inspiration. That would be the Flame Beast, which is based on the Qilin, a creature from Chinese mythology, but also prominently seen in Japanese mythology and renamed Kirin. True to the Japanese portrayals of the Kirin, the Flame Beast seems to be more deer-inspired than the dragon-based design given to it in Chinese lore. Hopefully that covers all of the major mythological inspiration that went into Okami, as well as a few minor but notable details. I'm well aware that the exact number of references are staggering, and trying to cover every one of these would take several videos, but I do encourage you to do some research for yourself, especially since some of it is even based in Chinese culture and philosophy, adding yet another culture to consider when looking at these two games. But we've only begun our examination of the Okami series. In the next part, I'll be taking a look at Okami's links to Japanese history. This has been a character development special. Thanks for watching.